I'm gonna keep these till I'm dead. I'm gonna keep these till I'm all done. So maybe I'll put a little bit of me into this and hopefully it'll stay there.
Millions of viewers knew Ian Roussel as the wild genius behind Full Custom Garage. But what they never saw was the cost of keeping that image alive. Behind the cameras, inside a brutal custom shop in the Mojave Desert, where the heat could bend both metal and men, Ian was pushing his body and his life to the edge. On television, the cars looked effortless. But the truth was anything but. By 2022, the silence around Ian became impossible for fans to ignore. And behind that silence was a story of exhaustion, survival, and the price of turning obsession into a career. Today, I'm going to tell you the real story behind Ian Roussel, beginning with his earliest years, before the cameras, before the fame, before Full Custom Garage, when he was just a boy fascinated by metal, engines, and strange shapes no one else had ever dared to imagine. The builder who wouldn't act Ian grew up in Southern California, and even as a kid, it was clear that classrooms were never really built for him. His real education happened in garages, where he took things apart, studied them, and rebuilt them in ways only he could imagine. He never followed the normal road into custom car building. There was no trade school, no polished apprenticeship, no perfect plan. Ian simply built, again and again, until his work became impossible to ignore. In his early 20s, he opened his own custom shop in the Mojave Desert. He worked mostly alone, without blueprints or CAD software. Every shape lived in his mind first, then slowly came to life through his hands. What made Ian different was painfully simple. He was not chasing trends or trying to please the industry. He cared about shape, metal, and the strange beauty hidden inside something raw. He later admitted that it was never really about loving cars in the usual way. For him, the addiction was creating them. Inside the shop, loud punk music filled the air. Ian was never trying to look polished for television. He was rough, honest, and completely himself. But he was not truly alone. Beside him was Jamie, his wife, and in many ways, the person holding the whole world together. She managed the shop, the clients, and the business side Ian never wanted to touch. Later, when television arrived, she helped shape what viewers saw on screen. And that is what makes Ian's story so painful. Because when a man builds his entire life around being real, putting him in front of a camera may change more than his career. It may change the very thing fans loved about him in the first place. When Hollywood Calls in the Desert. On March 28, 2014, Full Custom Garage premiered on MAV-TV, and Ian Roussel immediately felt different from everyone else on automotive television. At a time when car shows were filled with fake arguments, forced deadlines, and manufactured chaos, Ian gave viewers something rare. No big crew, no staged fights, no polished TV character, just one man, alone with metal, trying to turn the strange shapes in his head into something real. When something went wrong, he did not hide it. When a design changed, he explained why. That honesty became the heart of the show. Fans were not just watching cars being built. They were watching a craftsman think, struggle, adjust, and create right in front of them. But television does not always know how to protect something that real. Behind the scenes, producers kept pushing for more drama, more retakes, and more interruptions. They wanted Ian to repeat finished work for the cameras, stop his rhythm for better shots, and add conflict the show never truly needed. Ian resisted because he knew the work itself was enough. That stubborn honesty helped Full Custom Garage grow into a global favorite, lasting 9 seasons and earning deep respect from fans who saw it as more than entertainment. They were learning from him. They were rooting for him. And behind it all, Jamie helped hold the entire operation together, managing clients, production, and the chaos Ian wanted no part of. But cameras can capture the curve of a perfect fender. They cannot capture what it costs a man to keep giving everything he has. 115 degrees, and the price of conviction. Ian's Mojave shop had no air conditioning. In summer, The desert could climb past 110 degrees, and inside the shop, the heat was even worse. Welding torches, grinders, and a metal roof baking in the sun turned the place into an oven. Still, Ian kept working. 13-hour days, brutal deadlines, builds that had to be finished for television even when his body was already running on empty. And the cruelest part was that some of the work he poured himself into never even made it on screen because it was not dramatic enough for TV. Slowly, the question began to haunt him. Was he still the master of his own garage, or had he become trapped by the schedule of a show built around his name? By late 2022, his body finally broke. On a suffocating 115-degree afternoon, Ian collapsed on the shop floor. There were no cameras, no clients, no applause. Just an empty garage, punk music echoing from an old speaker, and a man watched by millions lying helpless in the heat. Help did not come until Jamie returned. When Ian woke up in the hospital, confused and exhausted, his first concern was not his own survival. He wanted to know how soon he could get back to work. That was the heartbreaking part. It was not the reaction of a man who understood he had nearly lost everything. It was the reaction of a man who had forgotten how to stop. But the collapse was not the deepest wound. Long before the desert took its toll on Ian's body, it had already taken something else from him, the soul of the garage itself. The last companion and the diagnosis. A few months before Ian collapsed, another life inside the shop was already fading. It was Dude, the dog who had been part of Full Custom Garage from the beginning. In early 2022, Dude was diagnosed with cancer, and for fans, the news hurt more than anyone expected. Dude was never a prop. He was not some cute gimmick added for television. He was simply there, as much a part of the garage as the sheet metal, the sparks, and the punk rock playing in the background. Fans watched him wander through the shop, sit near Ian, and quietly share the space where so many strange machines came to life. But to Ian, Dude was far more than a familiar face on screen. In that lonely desert shop, after the cameras stopped rolling and everyone else went home, Dude was the one who stayed. He was Ian's companion, his quiet shadow, and the last living presence beside him at the end of so many long nights. On May 5th, 2022, Dude spent his final night at Ian's feet in the shop, just as he had done for years. The next morning, he was gone. Ian later shared one final photo with him, without a long caption or public speech. Jamie was the one who told fans the news, because Ian could not bring himself to put that loss into words. The response was immediate. Fans flooded the internet with comments, memories, and old photos. They were not just mourning a dog from a TV show. They were grieving a friend they felt they had worked beside for years. And in that moment, many realized that Full Custom Garage had never been only about cars. It was also about a man and his dog, surviving together in the desert. Then, only months later, Ian's own body gave out. After his collapse in late 2022, doctors found that the damage was worse than he expected. He had suffered severe heat stroke and mild kidney damage after years of working in brutal desert heat. This was no longer something rest and water could fix. His body had been pushed too far. The warning was devastating. Doctors made it clear that if Ian kept working the same way, he could end up needing dialysis for the rest of his life. For the first time in his career, Ian had to cancel a build because his body simply would not let him continue. The man fans knew for grit, stubbornness, and endless endurance was now being forced to listen to his own failing health. In less than a year, everything hit him at once. Dude was gone. Ian collapsed in the shop. Then came the medical warning that his old life could not continue. 9 seasons, 13-hour days, 115-degree heat, and the loss of his closest companion had finally caught up with him. So how does a man like Ian Roussel respond when the life he built starts falling apart? He does not explode in public. He does not turn it into a spectacle. Instead, he does something quieter, and maybe even more heartbreaking. He begins to change. The door built in silence. When headlines announced the end of Full Custom Garage, many fans assumed the same thing. Another TV era was over. But the truth was much simpler. Ian was not fired. He was not cancelled. He chose to leave. Years of television had slowly shown him what mattered most. The schedule, the contracts, the constant pressure, and the growing disconnect between the work he loved and the way television wanted to present it had taken their toll. After losing Dude and facing serious health problems, Ian began looking at his life differently. Time had become more valuable than any TV deal. What most fans did not realize was that Ian had already been planning his next chapter. In January 2023, while still recovering from his collapse, he quietly launched the Full Custom Ian YouTube channel. More than a year before the final episode aired, he was already building a future outside television. The exit was not sudden. It was carefully planned. When Full Custom Garage finally ended in 2024, there was no public drama, no angry statements, and no burned bridges. Ian simply moved on. And for many fans, the YouTube channel felt like the version of Ian they had always wanted to see. No network deadlines, no artificial suspense, no forced television formula. When something went wrong, it stayed in the video. When a build changed direction, viewers saw the entire process unfold in real time. Jamie stepped fully into the producer role, helping shape the channel while Ian focused on creating. Longtime fans quickly embraced it. Many felt they were finally seeing the real Ian, not the television version. As his audience followed him online, something remarkable happened. The freedom he had spent years searching for finally seemed within reach. He was healthier, more independent, and back in control of his own work. But life was not finished testing him. Just as this new chapter was beginning to feel hopeful, Ian faced one more loss. This time, it was not his health. It was not a friend. It was the very place where his entire story had begun. Locking up the desert. In September 2024, Ian and Jamie Roussel officially closed the doors to the Desert Ranch shop. To understand what this meant to the automotive community, you have to understand what the Desert Ranch was. It had been Ian's Mojave stronghold for years, the birthplace of Full Custom Garage, the proving ground where hundreds of vehicles were resurrected from scrap iron into rolling art, the floors Dude used to pace between the welding rigs. It was the Mecca where fans from across America would make pilgrimages just to stand outside the gates and feel like they were close to something they revered. The final moments inside the shop happened in total silence. Before leaving, Ian stood looking at the last unfinished car sitting on the concrete. No words, no rolling cameras, no sentimental social media posts. Then, with his own hands, he locked up the doors he had walked through for 2 decades. A simple mechanical action that ended a definitive era. When the news broke, the community's reaction made it crystal clear what this patch of dirt meant to outsiders. Social media was flooded with photos from past pilgrimages. One guy talked about driving 3,000 kilometers just to catch a glimpse of Ian working through a crack in the garage doors, a trip Ian never even knew happened. Legends resurfaced about the car Ian refused to sell despite a 7-figure offer. He kept it not for money, but for a deeply personal memory he refused to exploit for television. Throughout his entire career, Ian only ever took on one true apprentice. That relationship didn't end over a personal falling out, but over something much more nuanced. Ian's creative philosophy simply couldn't be taught with words. That apprentice now runs his own successful shop and still points to Ian as the singular mentor in his life. Other builders posted about how watching Ian work at the Desert Ranch fundamentally rewired how they understood their own trade. As for how Ian handled the closure, exactly how he handles everything else, direct, no theatrics. The chapter was over. Holding on to the building after the chapter closed would just be holding on for the wrong reasons. After it all, the health scares, the profound losses, the closing of an era, where does Ian Roussel stand today? The answer redefines this entire story. The fire still burns. This is what those tragic headlines often miss. Ian Roussel is still working, not just surviving, but building, moving and creating with more freedom than he has had in years. His full custom Ian YouTube channel is growing, and his new shop feels like a fresh start. The old weight is gone. No network schedule, no forced drama. Just Ian, the metal, and the work. He is still taking on ambitious builds, from a 1949 Metro van headed toward SEMA 2025 to a revived 1968 Volkswagen inspired by the Porsche 917. He is still turning discarded industrial parts into wild machines most builders would never even attempt. If anything, his world has opened up. Without television forcing every project into a clean little package, Ian can finally let the work breathe. Fans have noticed it too. He seems lighter now, more relaxed, more willing to show the quiet thinking moments that TV used to cut away. And that may be his real legacy. Ian proved that a car show did not need fake fights, scripted chaos, or loud personalities to matter. For 9 seasons, fans watched one man in the desert build strange, beautiful machines with his own hands. That was enough. But his impact goes deeper than ratings. It lives in the fabricators who picked up a welder because of him. It lives in the kids who saw, maybe for the first time, what it looks like when someone finds the exact thing they were born to do. So no, this is not a tragedy. It is the story of a man who paid a brutal price for the work he loves, and somehow is still out there doing it on his own terms. The whole point. When you look at everything Ian Roussel went through, it does not feel like one sudden tragedy. It feels like years of pressure finally catching up with him. 13-hour days in brutal desert heat. A body pushed until it could not keep going. The loss of Dude, the quiet companion who had been beside him through so many lonely nights. Then the closing of the desert ranch, the place that carried 2 decades of sweat, sparks, and memories. But that is not where Ian's story ends. While most people thought his TV career was simply fading out, Ian was already building a new life. He launched Full Custom Ian on YouTube in January 2023, long before fans knew Full Custom Garage was coming to an end. He did not walk away angry. He did not turn it into a spectacle. He left with dignity, and somehow he found his way back to the work. That is the part fans love most about him. Ian was never performing. He was creating. He once explained that cars were never really the whole point for him. The real obsession was making things, shaping metal, and bringing impossible forms to life. And that obsession is still alive. Somewhere in a small shop in America, punk rock is probably blasting from an old speaker. Ian is probably staring at a raw piece of metal, seeing something in it that no one else can see yet. And this time, there is no network executive, no broadcast deadline, and no TV schedule telling him when to stop. That is not a tragedy. That is the point. So if you want to understand why fans still care this deeply, go watch Full Custom Ian on YouTube. Watch a full build without skipping. Within minutes, you will understand what made people stay with him all these years. And if you have been following Ian since 2014, tell us your favorite build in the comments. Like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.